Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high-performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And my guest today is Tim Calise. He is a versatile entrepreneur, investor, consultant, and podcast host who helps service business owners uncover the profits hidden inside of their existing businesses. By the age of 25, Tim had raised over $325 million for his investment company before moving on to building a seven-figure tech-enabled fitness business alongside his wife. And most recently, Tim was one of the 4 executive team members at GymLaunch alongside Alex and Leila Hormozi, where he oversaw the development and launch of Ellen, a machine learning SaaS company, which grew from 0 to 20 million in annual recurring revenue in just 6 months. And currently, Tim helps make founders' dreams come true by implementing his product to profit framework. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about this. So welcome, Tim, and thank you so much for taking the time to be on my show today.
Oh, I sincerely appreciate it, Claudia. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this. So, Tim, let's start with a fun question. If you had to describe yourself in only 3 adjectives, which ones would you choose?
Oh, great question. Inquisitive, driven, and probably purposeful.
Ooh, I like that. So are you happy with that description, or is there any room for improvement where you say, okay, some of these things maybe got me into trouble in the past, some of the things that I want to change, or are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think so. Take inquisitive, for example. I think that's can be a double-edged sword in some cases. And so I think where it has gotten me into trouble in the past is, I think underappreciating the things that I've accomplished and keeping me focused on, always learning, but not appreciating kind of where I've come from and where I am. And I also think it has led me down tracks of, kind of shiny object syndrome, especially in my earlier years, without kind of fully understanding the ramifications of, kind of being driven by thoughts rather than purposeful action.
Ooh, those are good points. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, I read that you felt like you were destined to be an entrepreneur from a very early age. So how old were you when you knew that you were made for this? And what was it about entrepreneurship that made you choose that path?
So as a young child, I remember I loved taking things apart. I loved understanding how things worked. And I was always kind of a problem solver, and that can be a double-edged sword too. It's kind of like, there are those people who, always find problems to be solved, and that's an endless pursuit. But I remember very distinctly, I was probably in middle school. So say, 10 or 11 years old. And I grew up playing lacrosse, the game here that was very popular. And my school didn't have a team. And so one kind of February vacation, I remember being on a plane and I had gotten the catalog of equipment from one of the, just that had come in the mail. And I sketched out a proposal to the head of my school on the exact costs of how much it would take to buy all the equipment and to start the team and all of these types of things. And so again, so at probably 10 or 11, I think I had this insatiable desire. I didn't know the word no. And I think also it was, I had this perspective of, if someone didn't tell me not that it wasn't possible, then it must be. And so my parents, to their great credit, really kind of cultivated that belief system in me that, I could pretty much accomplish anything I set my mind to. And that, I think, was the first domino that then, kind of set off a series of events that has now taken me, say, almost 30 years later.
That is so interesting. How do you think that your parents encouraged this mindset in you?
So my dad was in finance, so he was in professional services as well. And the paradigm that I saw kind of growing up, and especially as as a young person, you emulate what you see around you and things like that. And
Mhm.
so I was the kid who took a briefcase to school in middle school just because that's what I saw, the people, my dad doing. So I wanted to be like him. But I think the important distinction was uh, I grew up thinking or being kind of indoctrinated, for lack of a better term, with the idea that there is a way that life is supposed to go.
Mhm.
And that never really sat with me. So I knew I liked money. I knew I liked business. I knew I liked the idea of entrepreneurship. That it wasn't kind of it wasn't a sexy term at that time. It was just, it almost was, if you couldn't get a real job, then you were an entrepreneur at that time. But I knew that I wanted to do something that was outside of the mainstream. And I think that was probably a combination of, I knew the type of life that I wanted to live ultimately, and I had seen the sacrifices and what was required to really excel in, say, banking, for example. Just like being a lawyer, you've got to put your time in, and kind of that road is very well worn with stories of people feeling like they sacrificed too much. And I knew I wanted to have a family, and so I think I stumbled into this idea of kind of setting my own course because I saw what, the idea of my parents encouraged me to pursue things that were of interest to me. I think I took that and just kind of changed it by a couple of angles, and it led me down a path of kind of business ownership and now coaching and consulting.
It sounds like entrepreneurship to you was a way to experience freedom and self-expression. Is that how you see it, or how would you describe it?
Yes, I think you're exactly right. And I can remember saying, probably almost 15 years ago now, that I was never artistic in the traditional sense, but I think there's something beautiful about the creative element of, and again, I focus a lot on building product, and product in the business sense, in the entrepreneurial sense, is the expression of your point of view on the world, the problem you're trying to solve, the connection that you have with other people. And so I think I use that as my art, and being creative and coming up with innovative solutions to problems that I saw, was probably my way of both kind of establishing something for myself, but also expressing those pieces that I knew were important to me.
And this again, I find super interesting because a lot of the people that I talk to, they are the visionaries and creatives. But what I kind of heard from how you describe your story is that you always had this, like, a structured approach. Like, you didn't just have the vision of creating this team at your school or something. You came up with a plan,
Mm.
with an action plan to achieve that vision. So would you say that you have a very structured approach to creating or to translating this vision of yours and making it become a reality?
I think I'm an action taker by default.
Hmm.
So I think there are those that, when faced with uncertainty, plan.
Yes.
And there are those that, when faced with uncertainty, just take some kind of imperfect action. And I
Mhm.
think I can put words around it now. I think in the beginning, it was just, I had this feeling of, forward momentum, even, even if it wasn't kind of fully structured, was still better than kind of standing idle. And that has led me down paths which have had dead ends. By all means, it's not perfect. Uh, but I definitely default to, let's try something. And I think that's now taken also the approach of, I have the great pleasure to coach a number of business owners, and taking imperfect action and making offers, for example, is a very important component of, understanding kind of what's going to work and what path you're going to kind of carve out in your industry. I did a keynote speech about a year and a half ago on the reasons why you shouldn't write a comprehensive business plan.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I now mentor a number of up and coming both students as well as in high school and college as well as new entrepreneurs. And I think there's this idea that the business is the spreadsheet or the business is the business plan. And the reality is, it's like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the nose. The
Exactly.
reality is you can plan only so much. And I think structure matters because it helps articulate, it helps clarify your thinking, putting pen to paper. So you don't kind of go off with a half-built plan. But I think it can also go too far the other way, which is, pricing for perfection or planning for perfection is something that has led people either to not move forward or to struggle with resilience in the face of kind of change and uncertainty.
Yes, and you can really get stuck in analysis paralysis and just keep on planning uh, until until the cows come home. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
oh well, can you tell us more about your investment business and what motivated you to build that first business, and how were you able to raise 325 million for it?
Yeah, so I went to college for economics and finance because I knew I wanted to do something in the business, kind of the business world. And I landed initially at a large brokerage firm. And I was the guy in my early 20s who was answering phones and shuffling paper and getting coffee and all of those types of things. And after about 6 months, I came to a kind of a fork in the road. And it wasn't literal. It was more of a conversation I had with myself, which was, pretty soon I'm going to have to either commit to this path or go do something else. And commitment meant, do I see myself doing this for another 5 to 10 years at a minimum? And in my heart of hearts, it just wasn't for me. It was the wrong, it was like wearing the wrong clothes. It was probably right for many, but it wasn't right for me. And so, very fortunately, and this is a trend that I've seen, throughout my career, I have either lucked into or been fortunate enough to be kind of in and around people who have helped support me, even at their own kind of short-term detriment. And so, the guy I was working for said something very similar. You don't belong here. You want to go do something else. And he referred me to someone who had just started a very small investment company, actually, outside of the main financial centers here in the U.S. And in that world, your kind of metric is assets under management. And we had like $1 million under management, which means our fees were about $20,000 a year. So not even enough for both of us to subsist on. But at that time, I knew that I was in the right place. It was the right opportunity vehicle for me. And even as I articulated kind of early in my career, I just went and did it. Figured out very quickly what our unique selling proposition would be, and it didn't take long for me to figure out that I was on a at least a good track. I wasn't too far off base, and the idea was in the investment management business at that time, managers were had very lofty egos. And so this is kind of the early 2000s. And managers that were kind of known were almost, they had this approach to investors of, you should be lucky to put your money with me, which as a new person to the industry seemed really backwards. And so I said, you know what? I think there are a group of people who, we can go and raise money from, who's, they've saved for retirement and things like that. And I can just sell the idea of two things. One, you're never going to have to worry about your money going to zero, like that we're going to take good care of it. And the second is I articulated my appreciation for their confidence, and we were hyper communicative. So all I did was take the industry and go the opposite direction. And I
What
fell into
will
this idea of people were like, that's exactly what I want. It's actually not about returns. It's about confidence.
Mm.
And then I built on that idea. And, as with most things, compounding is a real dynamic in the world. And so we started small. We got $25,000 and $50,000 allocations. And then they were 100,000, 250,000, 500,000. And it took us about 2 years to go from $1 million to about 25 million. And then it took us about a year to go from 25 to almost 300 million, because we had a great track record, but we knew exactly who we were and who we were the best fit for. And so I learned a lot of lessons about kind of productization and market fit and things like that through that experience. Some of it was just I fell into it naturally, and some of them were really conscious choices that we made about what we wanted to be and what position in the world we wanted to secure for ourselves.
And what has this taught you about relationship building and effective communication?
So the end of that story, so just to kind of put it in context, I spent my kind of 21, 22 years old up to about the age of 25, almost 26, effectively working all the time, 7 days a week, crisscrossing the country to kind of put my first kind of stake in the ground. This was my first kind of real professional, role of any size. And that carried from kind of the early 2004 timeframe to late 2007, so almost 4 years. Uh, 12/31 of '07, we made the choice to effectively return all of the money to our investors because we believed that the market was going to have some kind of cataclysmic event. We were early by about 9 months, but I think it's important because in the middle part of '07, for anyone who was investing in that time, it was, this is when like mortgage defaults in the United States were starting to pick up and things like that. We very easily could have changed our stripes and changed our philosophy to try to match the market. But instead, we took our kind of moral and fiduciary duty very seriously. And we said, what we do and how we've done it no longer works in this market. And so to get to your question about relationships, we had an 8-figure revenue business that we effectively closed down and walked away from on principle. It was incredible short-term pain, but the long-term relationships that I kept and the trust that was built has now more than compensated me for the short-term loss. And I think a lot of that has to do with, thinking about when we're younger, we're kind of told that it's what you know. I think the longer in life that you go, it's who you know. And I think I've been fortunate enough to kind of understand those dynamics. So even the companies that I build now, I do them all in a collaborative kind of fashion, because if you know everything, then you don't need anyone else. And that is a very lonely, very stressful place to be. And so I've decided to kind of learn my lessons and be able to build very successful businesses in more of a partnership, relationship-driven approach.
That's so important. And thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's amazing that you focused on your values first and did not compromise them, even though you could have made a lot of money with that. But
We
as
could
you
have.
said, yeah, it's a short-term gain and long-term pain, or it's the other way around.
Yeah, and I probably, knowing what happened shortly thereafter, my health probably would have fallen apart if I'm
Yeah.
like really being honest about it, because I would have known we weren't doing the things that we felt confident that we could excel at. And the second you go outside of your kind of zone of genius, you go outside of your lane, you might have success, but it's possible, not probable. And I have learned myself that I have narrowed the things that I've chosen to do where I can stack the deck in my favor. So using probability to my favor. I think earlier in my career, I would ask myself, is it possible to be successful in this? And I think that is the wrong question. I think the
Mm,
question is it probable that I will be successful? And I
yes,
think the more often you think in terms of probability, not possibility, you will avoid some of the risk that undue risk that you would have to take by doing that.
that's right. And I think the other important aspect here is to look at what is draining your energy and how you manage your energy just in general. Because if you do things that replenish you and that you enjoy, then it's a completely different ball game than, doing something that drains you and you just don't feel comfortable doing. So that's definitely something to take into account. Do you have any tips for entrepreneurs out there who are trying to raise money for their businesses right now? What should they do and what should they definitely avoid?
So I work primarily with service businesses. So there are product-based businesses and technology businesses that are hugely capital intense, meaning they take a lot of money to get started.
Mhm.
Uh, I personally believe in doing as many kind of testing cycles as possible before you get to the point where you bring a lot of money to the table. And what that looks like is when most people, or many people I speak with, they say, I want to start a business. Their next point is, I'm going to build a general plan and go raise money.
Hmm.
That's creating before you validate is a
Yeah,
very dangerous game to play.
it
So
is.
I'm working with a technology company right now in real estate, and we're building some kind of SaaS technology. But before we even raised capital, and we're in that process right now, we effectively built the entire process in Excel and
Hmm.
manual work. Is it the core product? No. But we were able to go to the people that we thought would be the likely buyers. And we said, it's going to kind of do something like this. Let's walk you through, or, and have you use this product, which is effectively very quickly and rudimentarily built, just to validate the idea of, like, if this was, kind of more fully built out, is this something that you would be interested in using? And
Hmm.
so I would encourage people, before you even think about raising capital, is to validate what they call product market fit, even if it's not perfect. And the reason why that's important is because investors think in terms of risk. So if I gave you two options, I would say, I have this idea I want to raise money for. Does that sound risky or less risky than option B, which is, I have this idea. I've kind of, put this prototype together. I found this audience and they're willing to spend X dollars a month because I've already done pricing surveys. And now I'm just trying to raise money to bring it to fruition. The
Yeah.
second one is a lot less risky, which means you can command better terms. And what that looks like for most people is you give up less of the company, because in the beginning, usually you're selling an equity stake in the business. So number one, validate before you go out and raise money, even if it's a partial, kind of product, or part of the idea. So I would stay away from the idea of trying to sell a piece of paper. Very few companies have been able to do it. You hear about the great successes, but there are millions more that you never hear about that have died at that stage. And then the second is, know who you want as a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Not all money is the same. There are lots of categories, but the two biggest ones are, do you want a financial investor, which is money without any insider operations guidance? Or do you want a strategic partner who can bring money and advice?
Right.
Neither of them are necessarily better than the other, but you have to be very, very clear about which one you want. Because if you get a strategic partner that you don't want to listen to, they're going to get mad and you're going to get frustrated. If you
Hmm.
bring on a financial partner who has experience, but you don't build that into the deal, you will expect more of them than they're willing to bring to the table. You'll be frustrated and they'll be angry.
Right.
I would put off raising real money for as long as possible, because, again, it's like the risk is reduced the longer you go, and the terms
Hmm.
will be better, and you'll be better informed about who and what you need.
I totally agree about testing your products first and validating them,
Yeah.
because that's so important. And a lot of people don't do that when they start their business. But the other thing is, I just talked to someone right before this call, and he said that the business he's thinking about building is neurotech. So he would need a wet lab,
Yeah.
and it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
So in some instances, it's just not possible to build a quick prototype or something
Yeah.
like that. And you just need a lot of money to get started. Do you have
Yeah.
any tips for those cases?
Yeah, I think in those cases, and I have been in and around a number of those businesses before. Then you are what think of, again, an investor's looking in terms of risk. So if I personally, who have never run a neuro business before, said, I'm going to go raise $25 million because I need to build a wet lab and all of these other things, an investor rightly would look at me and say, you don't have knowledge, experience, expertise, or anything like that. I have a family member of mine who is, I think, on his sixth or seventh startup, but he is so well known in the industry that he can go out and raise money for any idea, because he's reduced the perceived risk of that deal because he's been there, done that. So if
Right.
you're a scientist, if you've been in that industry before, and it brings up a really good point, many people try to go outside of their area of expertise and try to raise money from people who look at it and say, why should I give you money if you've never actually demonstrated proficiency and success in this market? So for those people, hopefully my first kind of guidance would be, if you need to raise a lot of money because you can't test any other way, it should be either in an area that you have expertise in, or you need to build a team around you that reduces the perceived risk, execution risk that an investor is going to look at. I just think the flyer, especially in this environment today, the idea of I'm going to go into a new market by myself that I've never been in before and I can raise money, I just think the deck is stacked against you. You might find someone, but the terms are going to be very, very onerous for you. Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
What were some of the most memorable struggles that you experienced when you build your businesses?
So I have personally taken the approach of, I know myself well enough. So personally, I do my best work in a group. I always
Mm.
have. I process out loud. Talking through things is something that has always been really important to me. The longer I've gone through my career over the last couple of decades, the more I realize that that's actually true for most people. But entrepreneur isolation is a real thing.
Yep.
So the times that I have really struggled are the times where I have tried to do things on my own. I've tried to figure out what I need to know instead of who. And so the more open I have been with the net, and very conscious about building a network of people around me, the better off I've been. So I think the times where I've gone wrong are when my ego's gotten in the way, and I wasn't probably honest with myself about why I was doing what I was doing. I ran a technology-driven fitness business for a while, for about a decade, and we grew from 1 location to 8.
Nice.
It sounds good on paper, and I
Oh.
took a lot of pride in saying I was the biggest. I was kind of the king of the hill, the largest in the network, et cetera, et cetera. If I was really honest with myself, I would have made more money with 2 or 3, and I expanded too quickly. But I was driven by the idea of, I wanted the headline win. I wanted the idea of people watching from the outside saying I'm super successful, when in reality we're barely break even across. We had a decently profitable 1 location, and then I pretty much got them to all just above break even, and it was a waste of many years of pain and suffering, when I would have been better off being small and profitable. And I think you see that in a lot of industries. Anyone who touts revenue, it's not about revenue in most cases. It's about what's profit and how do you get there and things like that. In that business, I was working 80 hours a week, which was a big mistake. So I was like, I'm profitable, but I'm basically paying myself 0. Like those, and it sounds funny, but the reality is I could give you 12 examples right now of small businesses that think they're hugely valuable, when really as an employee, you're getting paid, and as an owner, you're getting nothing. And that is why most small businesses don't sell for anything worth anything close to what they think, is because the business and you are intimately entangled, and any investor will see that it's not an investable business. So I think there are a lot of lessons that I've learned along the way, but the more I have been conscious of living a leveraged life, and it's about how much do I get out of each unit of time, the better off I've been.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And by the way, what was it like to build this 7-figure fitness business with your wife? Did this experience test your relationship, or did it bring you closer together?
I think both. It depends on the time, because we also we were building a family at the time and things like that. So in the beginning, my wife and I worked kind of in our first location together, kind of trading off. We had our daughter shortly thereafter. I think in hindsight, I was building it again with a very much an ego-driven kind of approach. And I think I was, quite frankly, closed off to the idea. I think I could just kind of bulldoze my way to success. And I think as a 20-something-year-old male, that is unfortunately not uncommon, but also was driven by the wrong things. So I have a few very painful scars that were either times where she tried to warn me of things and I just wouldn't listen. I heard, but I didn't, I listened, but I didn't really hear her. And or times where I built a great team. And there's one time in particular where like we lost a bunch of employees very, very quickly. And it was a very painful lesson to learn that they were quitting me, not the business.
Mm.
And but I, you know what, those are the things you have to learn. And I'm a big believer that life will continue to serve you the lesson until you learn it. And to some extent, I'm glad I went through that because it really identified and uncovered some, not character weaknesses, but I think I definitely was being led by some of the wrong motivations.
Yeah, I always say that entrepreneurship is kind of like the biggest self-development journey that you can be on.
Yeah, I mean, the basic things are like everybody sees entrepreneurs like it's I start a business and then I have a Lamborghini and 20 million followers on YouTube. It's like that's just not the world that most entrepreneurs live in. And if you're doing it for the glamour, you're missing 99% of the actual work. And I think it's really easy, especially now, to look at success stories and think it was easy. I had the great fortune of working at GymLaunch alongside Leila Hormozi, who's one of the now kind of top business influencers out there. You talk about the work, the grit, the risk, the pain and suffering. It's unimaginable. It's not just 15-second YouTube shorts. There's so much more behind it, and I think it's not a shortcut to success, which I think is that's what it's becoming known for today. I become an entrepreneur. It's because, I want to go outside of the norms of society, and that's where all the pots of gold live. And there might be some truth to that, but that road is a heck of a lot longer and more windy than I think many people appreciate.
Definitely. And we'll come back to the GymLaunch in a moment. But before we do, I had another question about that fitness business with your wife. So
Yes.
I was wondering if there were any specific habits that helped you stay positive, supportive, and connected as a couple throughout this period.
So what I didn't appreciate at the time, which was I thought I had to be kind of this dominant leader, which is what I thought leadership was.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is 10 times better at hiring and onboarding and building culture than I am. I'm we're going to go conquer the mountain. If you want to come along. If you don't, that's fine. I'm going there anyway. So one of the things that we got to after, again, a bunch of pain and suffering on my part, was realizing that we had complementary viewpoints. And then instead of everybody being associated with everything or being responsible for everything, we kind of divided and conquered. And that allowed us the times where I probably overstepped were times where I stepped outside of my kind of zone of genius. And she's like, I got this, leave me alone. So once we kind of established some of those expectations, and again, it sounds ridiculous because it's kind of elementary type stuff. But when you're in the trenches, it's really common. I mean, amongst partners, whether it be spouses or otherwise. And so we started the behaviors of kind of a review preview. So we were both on the same page in our respective disciplines. And although she was probably better at it than I was, we pretty much had no work after, 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Because what happens is, as I'm sure we've all kind of lived the lesson, it just bleeds into everything, and you have to put some bounds around it. And so that's what worked for us. Ultimately, right now we've been fortunate enough to be able to kind of get through a number of these lessons and now work much better together. She actually worked with on one of the teams at one of my last companies as well. And so I think it can go very well. Communication is important and expectations are important, just like with any partnership.
Definitely. Yeah, I imagine there were lots of ups and downs on that journey.
Yeah, and we were starting a family, so I think we probably had the the Venn diagram of probably the perfect storm of going out on business on your own. We were kind of new parents. We were juggling all these various things, probably expanding too quickly, and so I think we probably stack the deck against us at that time. But I think we were also conscious enough to be aware of what was working and what wasn't after we kind of got served those lessons.
If we dig a little deeper into the, let's say, work-life balance aspect of that, can you tell us about your own health and fitness routines? What do they look like? How do you stay happy, healthy, and productive?
So this is the biggest change, say, go back 10 years or even 5 years to today. I took great pride, and I don't say that in a positive way, of being busy. And there's a gentleman, his name's Dan Martell. He wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. If you have not read it, after this interview, after this show, go and find his book. It is transformative. And the idea is, Dan has built multiple SaaS businesses, but the concept of buying back your time is around energy and making sure that you are only devoting your time and efforts to the things that you are uniquely skilled at and drive the business forward effectively, where you can deliver the most value. So where I got in trouble was I did everything. And I thought that I could do it all because I was supposed to be that person. Once I realized that not having a packed schedule was actually a good thing, not a bad thing. It didn't show weakness. It showed prioritization and intention. I now schedule everything personally and professionally weeks in advance. And I was not a great planner. So in the beginning, it was, I'm going to fill my calendar with what I need to do professionally and then my kids. And then if there's time left over, I'll have some time to do all of those things. That really never actually happened. Now I build those things in on a daily basis. So my wife and I like to walk together. That's when we kind of check in and have conversations and things like that. We have 2 dogs. So, kill a couple of different things at one time. Strength training is important to me. And actually, I have a mentor who's a very well-known guy in the real estate industry. And he said this one thing to me about 1.5 years ago. I'm more of an anxious person, just by kind of nature. And he said the phrase, fear has no place on paper. And that was really important to me because I had been struggling with how do I kind of maintain my mental health more than anything. And he's like, every morning, without skipping a day, take 5 minutes, whatever you need, and just do a brain download. Even if you don't do anything with it, it will be the most impactful 5 minutes of your day. And in the beginning, I was one of those people that was like, oh, that's like kumbaya kind of stuff, like journaling and all. Claudia, I tell you, it's like, there's a reason why all of these behaviors are touted as important. Now, I'm not a big believer in like a completely structured morning routine. Some days I wake up and I'm really excited about an idea and I just go to work. Other days I feel like I want to back off and, work out first thing in the morning and things like that. But I build a schedule around what works for me, and it is very much intention driven.
Yeah, the brain dump in the morning can be really, really good to just get all the worries out of your head and start with a clean slate. And the other thing that I've tried that I found super helpful, it's something that I started to do with the kids in the evening, where it's sometimes so easy. Something happens during the day, you get annoyed and everyone's kind of frustrated. And then just take a sheet of paper and write down 3 things that went really well or that you were grateful for or that you just enjoyed. And in the beginning, it was one of those days where my daughter had a kind of like, she said, a bad day. It was the worst day. There was nothing good. But then when we sat down and actually thought about it, we came up with so many things that were good on that day. And it was this complete mindset shift of, once you start focusing on the small things that bring you joy, you start to notice them more throughout the day as well. So it kind of like, it primes your brain to think about those things, and then it makes you feel happier in general. So there's a lot of science behind that too.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think taking the perspective, the thing that I now do is I limit I actually put out it's on my Facebook page. I wrote an intention document about
Mm-hmm.
6 months ago. And I said, here's the business I'm building. Here is where I am. Here's where I came from. Here's where I am. Here's where I'm going. Here is what I will accept. And here's what I will not accept as a person and as a person who's building a business. That was one of the most important things for me, because in it says the amount of time that I am willing to spend on work-related activities.
Mm-hmm.
The prior version of me was like, oh, my plate's already full. I still have I've got 30 minutes from, 8:45 to 9:15 when I'm sitting on the couch next to my wife. I can probably fit some more things in. And that was the wrong approach. So by being intentional about what it is you want to build as a life, and then having the discipline to stick to it, it causes you to do this prioritization on a dynamic basis, because you just can't keep adding. And it's, with our kids, we talk about these things as well. And to your point, I love that. Another parent that I know very well does the rose and the thorn kind of analogy, which is, from your reaction, you know what I'm talking about. Just the idea of, I think it's really important for our kids to not be afraid of trying something and it not working out. And so we also kind of, in addition to what worked and what was good and what wasn't, was, what was one thing you failed at today?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can take the teeth out of the idea of failure, I think we will all be very, much better off, because, from an early age, they're learning that, like, I need to kind of stretch myself. And if it doesn't work, the value's in the stretch, not in the result.
So true. And I think sports is something that really helps them embody this mindset, because you feel what it's like to lose, and you feel that it's not the end of the world, and you just keep at it, you try again.
Yeah.
Now, I promised it before, so we'll go back to the GymLaunch.
Yeah.
What was it like being part of the GymLaunch alongside Alex Hormozi? Can you share maybe a look behind the scenes and talk us through the strategy and tactics of GymLaunch, kind of like a case study? So what went well and what didn't, staying with that theme. And is there anything that you would do differently if you had to do it again?
So Alex started GymLaunch prior to me getting there. I want to make sure that there's no stolen valor here. Alex's idea was phenomenal. It was the right idea at the right time. And fundamentally, if you look below the surface, we did two important things. We delivered two important things with GymLaunch. The first was, we took a very novel approach to the fitness industry. So we went, to use like the red ocean, blue ocean analogy, we went the complete opposite direction of the rest of the industry. So gyms prior to GymLaunch coming to market were using free trials as a way to bring in new business. And Alex had the foresight to recognize that in business, you should actually charge the most when the pain is the highest. So think about fitness businesses in general. It's typically a new client has tried other things, they failed at other concepts, and it's really been kind of a race to the bottom as far as it relates to pricing. So we instituted the idea of a 6-week high ticket transformation challenge. We charged $600 for 6 weeks. And in the beginning, everyone thought we were crazy. But if you think about it, by starting the virtuous cycle of high ticket, the more you pay attention.
Yep.
And now we had the resources, or we were coaching gyms to have the resources to reinvest in a high quality, actually successful experience before we asked for a long-term commitment. That fundamentally changed fitness businesses probably forever, because all of a sudden you monetized something that at $600 that you were giving away for free prior. And now you actually gave the gym this lifeblood of cash to actually create the experience that they always wanted to in their hearts. That was kind of that was one very important dynamic. The second was, as a business, we realized very quickly that program allowed us to deliver an incredible value proposition almost immediately for our clients. And so GymLaunch was the fastest growing company in the United States, basically went from 0 to 35 million in revenue in under 2 years, simply because we gave gyms a better business model than had effectively ever existed in the past, including all the franchises out there that were charging $50,000 or $100,000 in fees to get access to information. We were better than just about all of them. So what I have taken from that is, it sounds simple, but it's not easy, which is, if you can create a business that allows your customers to have pricing power and differentiation, you've won half the battle. And if you can create a business where you effectively guarantee your customers earning significantly more than what you want them to pay you, you will have raging fans forever. And so everything I try to do is product driven, because I believe up to about $5 million a year in revenue, that is the only thing that matters. If you have the right product stack, you can acquire customers in the right way, you can deliver an exceptional experience that is at or above their expectations, and you will be able to build a sustainable business that is not relying on marketing and advertising. And in this industry, in this market climate we're in today, I think it should be the focus of just about every small business out there.
That is such a great strategy. And it reminds me about the idea of, I mean, if you start your business, and it doesn't have to be a fitness business or anything like that, but if you started with a high ticket offer, then you can provide the transformation that you want to provide, and you have the cash to create these other tiers in your business. Whereas when you start with a low ticket or even a free product and you have to build your way up, it's way harder to get that started. I mean, you might get a lot of people who bite and get your free offer, but that doesn't really help you anything with building your business. So I totally agree there. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't touched on so far?
I think the thing that I would say specifically for anyone who's building a business is to get used to using the phrase, what needs to be true in order for fill in the blank. So I don't believe that the traditional power ladder we were just talking about, kind of the ascent structure, works. It is very seldom that somebody comes in on a low ticket product and you are able to ascend them into a high ticket type customer. I believe that there are just different avatars. So the question you would ask yourself is, what needs to be true for someone to pay me 10 times more than they're paying me today? And what needs to be true for me to live the life that I want to live, not the one that I have today, if they're different? What needs to be true for me to have the things that I want to have? What needs to be true for me to build the team that I want to have? I would just encourage folks to think in those terms, because I have now been exposed to so many successful folks. And when you look behind the curtain, it is not they're better at sustaining pain and suffering than anyone else. They are actually playing a different game. And they ask themselves similar questions to the one I posed. And it's not about, if it's that old adage, if hard work was the key to success, a lot of people would be very successful that aren't today. It's not just pure horsepower. There is a different way to do it. You just have to really be intentional about reverse engineering that life that you want, or else you will be always on this never ending hustle and grind, always wanting more, treadmill, and you'll never get to where you want to go. So, it's only kind of one decision away. But I would certainly encourage anyone to kind of think in those terms, and you will then attract the type of people you want to attract, and you'll build the type of product and product-led company that you want to build. And it will feel very different than it might today.
Those were great questions. Thank you so much for sharing. I always like to say, if you want better results, you have to ask better questions.
Yeah.
Because those will get you there. Now, last but not least, where can our listeners find you online if they would like to connect or connect with you or learn more about you?
Yeah, website is timcalise.com. That's TIMCALISE.com. And then also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And I've got a great community of folks who, want tips like we've talked about today. So I encourage you to go to timcalise.com and you can go and see those for yourself and get in that group.
Fantastic. Tim, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been so much fun.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Take care and talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That's a fantastic, easy, and zero-cost way to help the show grow. Just use the link in the show notes and make my day. Want more? For quick, actionable tips and insights to guided meditations and a side of biohacking, join my inner circle and get access to exclusive subscriber-only content. Again, just use the link in the show notes to join the tribe. Thank you for your support and see you on the other side. Take care and talk soon. Bye.